Hey everybody, and welcome back to CrashLove Gaming. It's no secret that Nintendo is my favorite video game company overall. I've been playing their console since the NES, and most of my favorite games are either developed or published by them. Even though they have a long list of near-perfect games, they can't all be winners. I already made a top 10 list of Nintendo failures, and now I'll be listing my top 10 worst Nintendo games. Well, top 11, because I'm picking one from each console and handheld, not counting the Virtual Boy and upgrades like the Game Boy Color and DSi. To make it even harder on myself, I'm only looking at games developed by Nintendo themselves, so no Jekyll and Hyde or Ninja Bread Man. I'll be going in reverse chronological order, and I'm trying to only pick games available in the US, so here we go! We're starting off with a tough one. After 3 years on the market, the Switch already has a decent library of fantastic games, and a good chunk of them are first-party titles. As I was looking through the list of Nintendo-developed games, I had a hard time picking one for this entry. The first thing that caught my attention are the Labo games, but Labo is such an interesting concept I couldn't put them on the list. Plus, I haven't actually played with Labo, so that wouldn't really be fair. But then I saw it. A game so bad it's not even worth remembering. Not even so bad it's funny like some of the other games you might see here, but more like so bad, why did they make this? 1-2 Switch is the Switch equivalent of Wii Sports, except it has zero replayability and they were selling it at full price. 1-2 Switch is made up of several mini-games using the Joy-Cons. Not even looking at the TV. Nintendo tried to advertise this as a party game, but if you're at a party and you bring this out, party's over. It was a full-price tech demo that you might have played once when the Switch and the Joy-Cons were an exciting new technology, but you can't even play this at all on the Lite. I don't even have it in my collection. Maybe if I can find one for under $5. Speaking of non-party games, you had to know this would be the game for the Wii U. Animal Crossing is a massive franchise for Nintendo, and the Wii U gamepad would have added a new level of convenience and utility to the series, but they didn't do that. They gave us Mario Party without the party. There are a few mini-games, but they were later ported over to New Leaf, and the way you roll the dice by tapping an amiibo is just tedious and unnecessary. I honestly couldn't tell you what they were thinking when they made this and tried to sell it for $60. You'd have more fun playing an actual board game. At least we can forget about it now with the release of New Horizons. I'm going to cut straight to it. For the 3DS, the worst game came down to Steel Diver, which I've never played, Miitopia, which I've never played, and Tomodachi Life, which I did play, for 11 hours. Steel Diver looks really slow and boring, but it is a game. Miitopia appears to be just like Tomodachi Life, except with a point, which just leaves Tomodachi Life itself. It's weird. You add your Miis into the game and you can dress them, feed them, make them do activities, but you're mostly just watching them interact. It's kind of like Animal Crossing, but without the fun, or all the things that make it an interactive video game. It can be entertaining depending on who your Miis are, but I guess it depends on how much you enjoy virtual pets and fanfiction. Alright, what else did you expect here? There's a lot of crap on the Wii, but not by Nintendo. There is literally no point to this game. You'd think it would be Rock Band with a Nintendo twist, but you could just swing the Wiimote around and still win. Imagine if you could just punch the Guitar Hero guitar and get a perfect score. Perfect. The only thing Wii Music will be remembered for is whatever this was supposed to be at E3 2008. Nintendo made a lot of games for the DS, and personally I'd put something like Brain Age or Nintendogs here, but I know how big those games were for the booming casual market. For a similar reason, it wouldn't be right to put Personal Trainer Cooking here either, because it's not even a game. I mean, I could have said the same thing about Wii Music, but fuck Wii Music. I will admit, I didn't play a whole lot of DS games when they were released. I put more time into Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship 2007 than probably every other game combined, so I can't really speak to what these games were like at the time, only how I feel playing them now. Having said that, my pick for the worst Nintendo game on the DS is Yoshi Touch and Go, and it's a big gap between that and the next worst game. I turned it on expecting some kind of story mode, but it's just a minigame. Not even a minigame collection, just one single minigame. You guide Baby Mario through the sky by drawing paths of clouds, collecting coins, and avoiding enemies. I mean, that's what my first impression was because I didn't have the patience to get past the first level. Once you pass the vertical mode, you guide Yoshi through a side-scrolling level, doing pretty much the same thing except now you can shoot eggs at enemies. And that's it. There are different modes in multiplayer, but they all boil down to the same exact thing. I know the DS era was all about touching, but Kirby Canvas Curse came out just a few months later and had an actual story and boss battles. Yoshi Touch and Go would have been fine as a minigame attached to a proper Yoshi platformer, but not as a full-price retail game. Ooh, here's another tough one. Nintendo didn't actually develop that many games for the GameCube. Seriously, the Zelda games, Mario Sunshine, Double Dash, Luigi's Mansion, and Animal Crossing all come to mind, but those are some of the best games on the console. For the worst game, I'll have to look at something that isn't one of their top franchises. The bottom two I came up with are Wave Race and 1080 Avalanche. I never played any of the 1080 games, well, I guess I should say either of them, since like many of Nintendo's lower tier sports games, this one died on the GameCube. But this one's actually a lot of fun. I can't compare it to the SXX games because I never really played those either, but as someone who played the absolute shit out of the first couple Tony Hawk games, I think I would have really enjoyed this when it was released too. I can't say the same thing about Wave Race Blue Storm. Wave Race 64 to me was less a good racing game and more, wow, look at this water, these physics are so good. And that's kind of the vibe I get from Blue Storm as well. I have the same problems with it that I had with 64 too. The jet ski is hard to control, especially the sharp turns needed to hit the goals. The only thing I ever really did in Wave Race 64 was drive around in free mode because the gameplay is fun, but not when you're on the clock and need to Superman 64 your way around a track. Man, the farther back we go, the harder this gets. We're in a similar situation as with the GameCube, except all these games are top tier franchises. Except Rhythm Heaven, but that was Japan only. I'm not counting the classic NES series either because that would be too easy. A Link to the Past and the Super Mario Advance games are remakes, so those won't work. My only choices here are Metroid, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Wario. And I'm gonna have to go with Mario vs. Donkey Kong. While Mario vs. Donkey Kong was the start of a fun puzzle game series, WarioWare is way more entertaining in my opinion. Metroid Fusion and Wario Land 4 are almost off the table on this one. I know a lot of people have issues with Fusion, but it added a lot of story and lore to the Metroid series, which up to this point was only explained in manuals and conveyed through gameplay. And it was the first Metroid game in 7 years. Well, actually Prime was, but only by a day. Wario Land 4 might not be the best Wario game, but it mixes platforming and a bit of puzzle solving, where Mario vs. Donkey Kong is mostly based on puzzles. And the game is ugly. Pre-rendered graphics might have been the cool new thing in 1994, but 10 years later on the Game Boy Advance, they don't look so great. And this one didn't even have a level editor. Well, it actually did, but it was removed before the final version. I thought this one would be the most difficult entry yet. The majority of good N64 games were developed by Nintendo themselves or Rare, but it was actually pretty easy. Pokemon Puzzle League might be a decent puzzle game. I can't say because I'm not really into the genre, but it just doesn't hold up next to other Nintendo games like Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Star Fox, or even Wave Race 64. My biggest problem here is the visuals. It starts off with an anime cutscene that looks surprisingly good for the 64, but the rest of it looks like a fan game. It's honestly like they just image searched Pokemon and stuck the JPEGs in the game. Trust me, I used to have a zip disk full of Pokemon images. I was actually surprised to see that this was developed in-house. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad game, I'm sure a lot of puzzle enthusiasts really enjoyed it, but it's not my thing, and that's why I say it's the worst. I caught a break with the last entry, but almost all of the first-party Super Nintendo games are classics. If I was including games only released in Japan, I could probably get away with Motoko-chan no Wonder Kitchen. Nintendo gave it away for free to anyone who bought mayonnaise. The next logical choice would be Super Scope 6, the minigame collection that came bundled with the overpriced, oversized, battery-destroying Super Scope. But I feel like that's cheating since it was free and was only included as a demo for the peripheral. I was able to narrow down my decision to 3 games: Wario's Woods, Sutton Racer Fx, and Pilot Wings. I didn't play Pilot Wings on the Super Nintendo, but I did have some fun with the 64 sequel. The reason it's one of my choices here is because I really only liked flying around. I hated trying the missions. The same goes for the original, except it's a lot more basic. I didn't pick this one because it did a good job of initially showing off what the Super Nintendo could do at launch, and the story takes kind of a serious turn that I didn't know about until pretty recently. Sutton Racer Fx was co-developed by Argonaut and used the same Super FX chip as Star Fox. It looked incredible at the time, but now it's kinda hard to watch in motion. And I can never really get the controls down. But that's not my pick. I'm gonna have to go with another puzzle game. This is totally due to my bias against puzzle games, but it's my list. Don't like it? Leave a comment. It's a match 3 game that is kind of like a cross between Tetris and Dr. Mario. This game does get points for presentation due to the lovely 16-bit renditions of Mario characters, but it's just a puzzle game. Around here is where things start to get a bit messy. In the 80s and early 90s, you didn't always know exactly who developed the game. This is especially true for Nintendo, who had quite a few developers under their umbrella. We're at the bottom of the list, but I'm sticking to my rules. F1 Race is a game I considered, but it's actually a port of an NES game that was developed by HAL. The port was all Nintendo, but the game actually isn't bad for what it is. It's a very standard time-based racing game, but for a 1990 Game Boy game, it's decent enough. After a bit more digging, I found Radar Mission. Now, I thought it was going to be a Game Boy version or a remake of Radar Scope, but it's not. It's literally Battleship. There are a few additions to make it more unique as a video game, but you set up your ships on a grid and take turns firing on squares. I could see this as a decent way to pass time while in a car, but only if you had another player who also had their copy of Radar Mission and a link cable. There is a second game mode where you actually get to shoot other ships in first person view, but it doesn't add a whole lot more to the game. There were a ton of other single player games on the Game Boy that were much more engaging. The NES has a lot of games I could easily choose from. Most of the Black Box series games are too simple even for a child by today's standards, but I wanted to take release date into account. Super Mario Bros. Might be the most important game ever made, but it doesn't look too good nowadays. There are several Zapper games I could pick, or even Nintendo's old sports games. I tried out a lot of prehistoric type stuff for this final entry. I considered Clu Clu Land because I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, or Kung Fu, which is like the great ancestor of 90s modern beat 'em ups, but that was actually a Nintendo developed port of an arcade game not originally made by Nintendo. Another close one was Pro Wrestling, the game where you mash the spin kick button. I really didn't want to go with a sports game or another puzzle game, so for this entry I'm going to have to say Urban Champion is the worst Nintendo game on the NES. I mean, it's technically a one-on-one fighting game released long before Street Fighter 2 set the standard. You have a set amount of health, but the goal is to push your opponent to the other side of the screen. Maybe this is where Sakurai got the idea for Smash Bros. If you watched my Yu Yu Hakusho video, you know how I feel about fighting games on the NES. You have two buttons and they both punch. I guess one is light and one is heavy because one of them knocks the dude over and the other one just annoys him while he knocks me over. The game is very simple. It looks like 8-bit ass and I don't even think multiplayer could save this one. If I had to pick a multiplayer versus game in 1986, I would probably go with Balloon Fight over this. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave me a comment, let me know what your worst Nintendo games are. Follow me on all social media at CrashLove Gaming, subscribe for more. Also, I have a Patreon now, so if you enjoy my videos and want to toss a little support my way, the link is down below in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.